Today, the US Justice Department, together with 15 other states and the District of Columbia, has sued Apple in US District Court in the District of New Jersey for violating Antitrust Act. That is the breaking news. Of course, this caught my attention as someone who lives in technology day in, day out. So I thought it's a good idea to break this down and outline my thoughts on this news. In case you don't know me, I'm Uma Vanka. I'm a technologist and an author of a few books. Here in this channel, we talk about technology, leadership, and related topics. But before we start, I want to clarify that although I have used Apple products, unlike some of my friends, I'm not a hardcore Apple guy. I currently own an Android phone and I have a non-Apple tablet. What that means is I am not partial towards Apple in any way, shape, or form. So I thought I would put it out there. Now, from the press conference, from this morning from Attorney General Merrick Garland, multiple points jumped out at me. Number one, it was stated something to the effect of Apple imposes contractual restrictions and fees that limit the features and functionality on their platform. It also said it restricts connectivity to third-party apps. And this is from the press conference. And yes, anyone who heard of Apple knows this. Apple does, keep things quote unquote within the family for sure. We all know that. But that's their business model. In fact, I would argue that it hurts them as much as it helps. For example, one of the main reasons I personally stay away from Apple is the fact that it's restrictive. I never owned a MacBook. I had an iPhone at some point. I never owned an iPad. So I would argue that Apple is certainly losing business due to this particular business decision. Number two that jumped out at me, Apple restricts messaging to non-Apple products. The press conference alleged that Apple does it by diminishing the functionality of its own messaging app and by diminishing the functionality of third-party messaging apps. So let's dig into this a little bit. First, why would Apple diminish the functionality of its own app? I don't believe that's true. Of course, as long as both the sender and the receiver are using Apple products. The issue here seems to be non-Apple products won't be able to see the typing indicator of the messages sent from an Apple phone, and the quality of those videos received by non-Apple products are diminished because the quality is less, giving a perception that Apple products are better compared to non-Apple products because the same video on an Apple product is far better or is of far better quality. I see where this is coming from, but I believe the public knows what's happening. In fact, I would also argue that if the messages coming from an Apple product to a non-Apple product are not of great quality, but the messages coming from an Android phone, for example, to the same non-Apple product or phone are of much higher quality, the non-Apple user would obviously think that Apple products suck because all the messages they get from outside of Apple network are of much better quality. So you tell me, is Apple actually hurting themselves or helping by restricting their messages outside of their network or outside of their ecosystem? Okay, now number three, Mr. Garland quoted an example where someone asked Apple CEO if they will change the messaging rules because an iPhone user couldn't message his mom who uses an Android phone, to which Apple CEO apparently replied that he should get his mom an iPhone. It was actually quoted by Mr. Garland in this press conference. Sure, if I'm the Apple CEO, I would say the same thing. But every coin has two sides. The same gentleman who asked the question could have gotten himself an Android phone instead of changing his mom's phone, isn't it? No one is restricting it. But that was quoted in the lawsuit press conference today. The press conference also alleged that Apple has gained monopoly not by making their products better, but by making other products worse. We have to remember that Apple is a business. They will make their decisions on the basis of what benefits them. I wonder, how is it even possible to make quote-unquote other products worse? That's what jumped out at me. Most companies restrict integrations to their competition. That's happening. And again, those decisions are double-edged swords, as we discussed earlier, that will keep many away from Apple in this case, right? I'm a good example of this. But on this topic, I do want to share my experience though. I can expect a pretty good quality from every Apple product. That's a fact. For example, I once dropped my phone or my iPhone in the past by accident from the 18th floor of a building, and it fell on concrete. Absolutely no damage to the phone. Absolutely none. When I compare the video quality, for example, of an Apple TV with its competition, Apple's comes far superior. So I'm not sure I agree that the 2 billion or so Apple users in this world are sticking to Apple only because Apple is tricking them with their monopoly tactics, or quote-unquote monopoly tactics, right? Because I talk to my friends, everyone loves Apple products. And finally, the conference started by stating that Apple's income exceeds individual GDP of 100 countries. It also said Apple's share of the US performance smartphone market exceeds 70%. My takeaway from that is Apple is big. So is this lawsuit coming because Apple is big? I don't know. What are your thoughts? However, don't get me wrong. I am glad to see our government going after the big guns and not necessarily being in quote-unquote their pockets. Sure, you can make an argument that it may not be that easy for an Apple user to switch out of Apple without swapping out all their devices. Hence, Apple is creating, again, a quote-unquote dependency on its products, leading to direct or indirect monopoly. First, that's not what I heard from the press conference. But Apple has made a decision to operate in isolation. And again, as we discussed, it hurts them as much as it helps. We already discussed this. Moreover, no one is forced to buy Apple products to begin with. At least I haven't met anyone who was forced to buy Apple products. Every Apple user I know sticks to Apple because they love Apple products. In fact, they feel pretty proud of being an Apple user. And certainly, I don't know how Apple is diminishing its competition by simply keeping some distance. I'm also not a legal expert, and I don't know who will win this lawsuit. But here is the point. I'm not sure what the larger implications are for government going after one of the key contributors to our economy. And moreover, the sheer optics of the entire US government going after a company whose products are actually, putting US in the world map, basically increasing US as standard on the world map. I don't know the optics of that is going to look like. Do you think our government is right in going after Apple? You think the case has legal standing? Let me know your thoughts.